Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of those neighborhoods you see on postcards. The kind with white picket fences, perfectly green lawns, and neighbors who wave when you drive by. But behind one of those doors, on a day that started like any other, a dog did something so strange, so out of character, it sent a ripple of ice through the responding officer's veins. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, he didn't even whimper. He just pointed. And what he was pointing at was hidden in plain sight, a secret buried under a blanket of suburban perfection. This is one of those stories that peels back the veneer of normalcy to reveal the chilling darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface. So you probably shouldn't be listening to this alone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, I'm always curious where you guys are tuning in from, so drop your city or state and the current time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The call comes in at 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. It's not a siren screamer. No reports of shots fired, no frantic pleas for help. It's the quiet kind of call, the one that usually ends with an officer jotting down a few notes and clearing the scene in under 10 minutes. A welfare check. The caller is a woman named Carol, and she's worried about her brother, Arthur Finch. He hasn't answered her calls in 3 days, which for Arthur is like a solar eclipse. He's a man of routines, of predictable patterns. His Tuesday is always the same. Work from home, a light lunch at 12:30, and a call to Carol around 2 p.m. to complain about interest rates or the quality of modern television. The silence is the alarm bell. Officers Davis and Miller pulled their cruiser up to 114 Willow Creek Lane. The house is exactly what you picture for a man named Arthur Finch. It's a modest but immaculate single-story ranch. The lawn is a carpet of impossibly green grass, the kind that looks like it's maintained with scissors and a ruler. The rose bushes lining the walkway are pruned to military precision. Not a single weed dares to show its face. It's the very definition of suburban tranquility. Davis, a 20-year veteran with a weary sigh permanently etched on his face, kills the engine. "Looks fine to me," he says, his voice gravelly. "Probably on a cruise and forgot to tell his sister. We'll be out of here in 5. Miller, younger by a decade and still carrying a spark of eager curiosity, just nods, his eyes scanning the property. Something about the perfection feels sterile, artificial, like a model home that no one actually lives in. They walk up the path. A half-full glass of lemonade sits on the small porch table, condensation beaded on its side, a single sad-looking lemon slice floating at the top. The first tiny crack in the facade of normalcy. It's a warm day, but not warm enough to keep condensation on a glass for 3 days. They ring the doorbell. A cheerful, melodic chime echoes, then silence. They knock, louder this time. "Mr. Finch, police department, you in there? Arthur?" Davis's voice booms, but the house just absorbs the sound. They do a perimeter check. All the windows are closed and locked. The back door, a sliding glass unit, is also secured. Through the glass, they can see a living room so tidy it looks staged. Davis gets back on the radio, confirming the situation with dispatch. The sister, Carol, is adamant. Arthur has a heart condition, she had told them. He never, ever misses a call. This is the key phrase they need. Legally, it's a gray area, but the mention of a potential medical emergency gives them grounds for what's known as an exigent circumstances entry. It's a legal principle that allows law enforcement to enter a property without a warrant if there's a reasonable belief that a person inside is in imminent danger. It's a judgment call, and one that can be heavily scrutinized later. But right now, the silence from inside the perfect house is starting to feel less peaceful and more ominous. With a nod from their sergeant over the radio, Davis uses a pry tool on the front door. The lock gives way with a sharp crack. "Police department," he announces again, stepping over the threshold, his hand resting on his service weapon. Miller follows, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim, curtain-drawn interior. The air inside is cool and still, smelling faintly of lemon polish and something else, something vaguely metallic and earthy. The house is pristine. Not a cushion out of place, not a magazine askew. And that's when they see him. Not Arthur, but Winston. Winston is Arthur's golden retriever, a handsome dog with a friendly face, but the dog standing in the middle of the living room is not friendly. He's not aggressive either. He's a statue. He's frozen, his body rigid, his tail low and stiff. He doesn't bark, he doesn't growl, he doesn't even whimper. He just pointed. And what he was pointing at was hidden in plain sight, a secret buried under a blanket of suburban perfection. Davis, a 20-year veteran with a weary sigh permanently etched on his face, kills the engine. "Looks fine to me," he says, his voice gravelly. "Probably on a cruise and forgot to tell his sister. We'll be out of here in 5. Miller, younger by a decade and still carrying a spark of eager curiosity, just nods, his eyes scanning the property. Something about the perfection feels sterile, artificial, like a model home that no one actually lives in. They walk up the path. A half-full glass of lemonade sits on the small porch table, condensation beaded on its side, a single sad-looking lemon slice floating at the top, the first tiny crack in the facade of normalcy. It's a warm day, but not warm enough to keep condensation on a glass for 3 days. They ring the doorbell. A cheerful, melodic chime echoes, then silence. They knock, louder this time. "Mr. Finch, police department, you in there, Arthur?" Davis's voice booms, but the house just absorbs the sound. They do a perimeter check. All the windows are closed and locked. The back door, a sliding glass unit, is also secured. Through the glass, they can see a living room so tidy it looks staged. Davis gets back on the radio, confirming the situation with dispatch. The sister, Carol, is adamant. Arthur has a heart condition, she'd told them. He never ever misses a call. This is the key phrase they need. Legally, it's a gray area, but the mention of a potential medical emergency gives them grounds for what's known as an exigent circumstances entry. It's a legal principle that allows law enforcement to enter a property without a warrant if there's a reasonable belief that a person inside is in imminent danger. It's a judgment call, and one that can be heavily scrutinized later. But right now, the silence from inside the perfect house is starting to feel less peaceful and more ominous. With a nod from their sergeant over the radio, Davis uses a pry tool on the front door. The lock gives way with a sharp crack. "Police department," he announces again, stepping over the threshold, his hand resting on his service weapon. Miller follows, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim, curtain-drawn interior. The air inside is cool and still, smelling faintly of lemon polish and something else, something vaguely metallic and earthy. The house is pristine. Not a cushion out of place, not a magazine askew. And that's when they see him. Not Arthur, but Winston. Winston is Arthur's golden retriever, a handsome dog with a friendly face, but the dog standing in the middle of the living room is not friendly. He's not aggressive either. He's a statue. He's frozen, his body rigid, his tail low and stiff. He doesn't bark, he doesn't growl, he doesn't even whimper. He just pointed. And what he was pointing at was hidden in plain sight, a secret buried under a blanket of suburban perfection. Davis lets out a slow breath, the kind you hear from a man who's seen too much to be surprised, but is still tired of being right. The dog doesn't care about his skepticism. Winston remains a living compass needle, locked onto that one patch of flawless green grass. "All right, Miller, let's go look at the grass." There's no humor in his voice now. The sterile perfection of the house, the untouched glass of lemonade, the weird, focused dog, the small, odd details are piling up, forming a weight in the bottom of your gut. You're with Miller. As he slides the glass door open, the warm, humid air of the afternoon rushes in, a stark contrast to the refrigerated stillness of the house. Winston, his duty seemingly done, lets out a low whine and collapses onto the carpet with a soft thud, although his eyes remain fixed on the two officers as they step outside. It's as if he's passed the baton. Your turn now. The backyard is just as meticulous as the front. A small, perfectly clean gas grill stands on a pristine concrete patio. A single patio chair is angled toward the lawn. The grass itself is a marvel. It's a putting green, a sea of uniform blades with not a single clover or dandelion in sight. You can smell freshly cut grass, but underneath it there's that same faint, earthy, metallic scent from the house, stronger now in the open air. It's the smell of damp soil and something else, something that you can't quite place, but it makes your hairs on your arms stand up.
They walked to the center of the lawn, to the area Winston had pinpointed with such unnerving focus. You're standing there with them, scanning the ground. Nothing. It's perfect. It's a seamless carpet of green. Davis crouches, running a hand over the grass. Feels fine, looks fine. He stands up, brushing his knees. Kid, maybe the dog just really hates gophers. But Miller can't shake the image of the dog, that rigid, silent point. It wasn't a game, it was a warning. He gets down on his hands and knees, his face inches from the turf. The sun is bright, casting tiny shadows from every blade of grass. He squints, looking not at the blades themselves, but at the space between them. And then he sees it. The first twist. It's an almost imperceptible line, a seam so fine it's more a suggestion than a reality. The grass on one side of the line is a fraction of a shade darker, the blades a millimeter taller. It's a rectangle, a perfect man-sized rectangle of newer sod. "Dave, get down here," Miller says, his voice low. Davis kneels beside him and Miller traces the faint outline with his finger. "You see that? It's new sod, laid perfectly, but it's new." The sheer artistry of it is the most unusual detail. This wasn't a homeowner patching a brown spot. This was the work of a master craftsman, someone who blended the new piece in so skillfully it was functionally invisible. The pride taken in the concealment is in itself a profoundly chilling act. Davis is silent for a long moment. He understands the implications. You don't lay a 6 by 3 foot patch of sod in the middle of a perfect lawn for no reason. He stands and walks back to the cruiser without a word, returning with the standard issue evidence collection kit. From it, he takes a small garden trowel. This is a critical moment. He knows that the second that trowel breaks the soil, the nature of their presence here changes irrevocably. This is where the legal theory of the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine becomes a very real and present danger for any future prosecution. If a judge were to later rule their initial warrantless entry into the house was unlawful, that the sisters' worry wasn't enough to constitute exigent circumstances, then every single piece of evidence they discover from this point forward could be thrown out. The pointing dog, the new sod, whatever lies beneath, all of it could become inadmissible, the tainted fruit of an illegal search. The entire case could be lost before it even begins. Experts still argue over the fine line between a welfare check and a search, and Davis knows this case is balanced on that razor's edge. He chooses his spot carefully, at a corner of the nearly invisible rectangle. He pushes the tip of the trowel under the edge of the new sod and lifts. The piece comes up easily, too easily, like lifting a rug. It wasn't rooted. It was placed. Beneath it, there is no grass. There is only dark, rich, freshly turned soil. It's damp and has been compressed, flattened with a heavy weight. It's a stark, ugly wound against the hard, clay-packed earth of the rest of the yard. The earthy, metallic smell is overwhelming now. There's no mistaking it. It's the smell of decay. The second twist isn't what they find, but what they don't. There's no body part, no shred of clothing, just the undeniable evidence of a recent major disturbance. The meticulousness of the cover-up is what's so terrifying. Someone hadn't just buried a secret, they had landscaped it, hiding it under a veneer of impossible perfection. They had tried to erase it from the very earth. Davis stands up, his face grim. He pulls out his radio. His voice is flat, devoid of all emotion. "Dispatch, this is 7 Adam 15. You can cancel the welfare check. We have a crime scene. I need detectives and the forensics unit at 114 Willow Creek Lane. And get a supervisor down here. We're going to need a warrant to go any further." He turns to Miller, who is still staring at the dark patch of earth as if mesmerized. Don't touch anything else, kid. Not a damn thing. The quiet tranquility of Willow Creek Lane is shattered. Within minutes, the street is no longer a postcard. It's a flashing tableau of red and blue lights. Yellow tape goes up, a stark, ugly gash across the perfect front lawn. Neighbors peek out from behind their curtains, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. The illusion has been broken. The secret that the dog pointed to, the secret hidden by a master's hand, is about to be unearthed, and everyone on this quiet, perfect street can feel that things will never be the same. The forensics team arrives, and the backyard transforms from a patch of suburban bliss into a gridded, numbered, and painstakingly documented dig site. The silence of the afternoon is replaced by the low hum of a generator, the quiet murmurs of investigators, and the rhythmic scrape of shovels against soil. They work slowly, methodically, removing the disturbed earth inch by inch, sifting every handful. What they're looking for isn't a mystery anymore. The question is no longer if something is buried here, but who. And you know, with a cold certainty, that it's Arthur Finch. While the dig continues under the glare of portable floodlights that push back the encroaching twilight, the investigation inside the house begins in earnest. With a proper warrant now in hand, detectives can dismantle the sterile perfection that officers Davis and Miller first encountered. They are looking for Arthur Finch, the man, not just his body. They need to know who he was, what he did, who he knew. His sister Carol, her voice thick with unshed tears, provides the basics. Arthur was 54, an accountant for a small downtown firm. Divorced a decade ago, no kids. Quiet, private. A man who, by all accounts, didn't have a single enemy in the world. He was, she says, a creature of habit. The kind of man who would notice if a picture frame was moved half an inch. Which makes the state of his house even more perplexing. It's not just clean, it's devoid of personality. The walls are bare, painted a neutral beige. The furniture is functional, unremarkable. There are no family photos, no vacation souvenirs, no clutter of a life lived. It's more like a hotel room than a home. You walk with the lead detective, a sharp-eyed woman named Detective Isabella Rossi, as she moves from room to room. In the kitchen, the spice rack is alphabetized. In the bathroom, the towels are folded into perfect hotel-style triangles. But this sterile environment creates a legal headache. The absence of evidence can be as confounding as its presence. For instance, the McNaughton rule is a famous legal test for insanity, focusing on whether a defendant knew the nature of their act or that it was wrong. While not directly applicable here yet, the underlying principle, understanding a person's state of mind, is crucial. Rossi's trying to build a psychological profile of the victim, but Arthur's home offers no clues. Was he obsessive-compulsive, a minimalist, or was the scene scrubbed clean by someone else? This ambiguity makes it hard to establish a baseline of what's normal for Arthur, complicating the search for anything out of place.
They find his office, and it's more of the same. A desk with a neatly stacked pile of papers, a computer, a pen holder with 3 identical black pens. Everything is in its place. It's a room that screams order, logic, and numbers. Rossi sits at the computer, but it's password protected with high-level encryption. The tech guys will have to deal with that later. She opens the desk drawers, more files, all perfectly labeled. Insurance policies, tax returns, bank statements. Nothing seems amiss. His finances are solid, his life contained in manila folders. Then Rossi checks the office closet, and behind a row of neatly hung gray and blue suits, she finds it. The first real glimpse into the man behind the beige walls. The first real twist in understanding who Arthur Finch was. Tucked away on the top shelf, behind a stack of old shoeboxes, is a small wooden crate. Rossi carefully lifts it down and places it on the desk. Inside, nestled in soft packing foam, is a dollhouse. But it's not a child's toy. It's a work of art, a breathtakingly intricate 1:12 scale model of a Victorian mansion. Every shingle on the roof is individually cut and placed. The windows are real glass. The tiny brass doorknob on the miniature front door actually turns. It's a masterpiece of precision and patience. Deeper in the closet, they find more. Another crate holds a modern beach house, complete with a tiny sand-filled patio and a miniature surfboard leaning against a wall. A third contains a rustic log cabin. These aren't just kits, they are custom-built, unique creations. This was Arthur's secret, his hidden passion. In his world of rigid order and gray suits, he was a master craftsman, a creator of tiny, perfect worlds. This discovery is the single most unusual detail so far, a splash of vibrant, obsessive color in an otherwise monochrome life. It seems innocent enough, a quiet man's solitary hobby, but in a homicide investigation, nothing is innocent. Every detail, no matter how small or strange, could be a thread. Rossi picks up the dollhouse again, her gloved fingers tracing the delicate lines of the porch railing. She peers into the windows. The inside is just as detailed as the outside. There are tiny upholstered chairs, a miniature grandfather clock, and even a microscopic set of keys on a table in the foyer. But it's the dining room that makes her pause. Inside, a tiny table is set for two. 2 wine glasses, 2 plates, 2 chairs. One for him, and one for who? And that's when her partner calls her from the main living area. He's found something else. Tucked away on a bookshelf behind a row of accounting textbooks is a thick leather-bound photo album. It's not filled with pictures of family or friends. It's a scrapbook. A scrapbook for Arthur's hobby. Page after page of photographs documenting his creations. The Victorian house, the beach house, the log cabin. Each photo is dated with neat handwritten notes detailing the materials used, the hours spent. But as you flip towards the back, the photos change. The last dozen pages aren't of finished houses. They are photos of a work in progress, a new project. And as you look over her shoulder, a cold dread settles in your stomach. The half-finished dollhouse in the photographs is a perfect 1:12 scale replica of the house you're standing in right now, 114 Willow Creek Lane. The pictures show the exterior, mostly complete. The same siding, the same windows, the same front door. There are notes in the margins. Match the shade of the porch lemonade precisely. Remember the slight scuff on the 3rd step. He was recreating his own world in miniature. The final chilling photograph is a close-up of the dollhouse's backyard. The lawn is a perfect, flat green square, but in the center of it, Arthur had drawn a small, faint rectangle in pencil, a placeholder. The last entry in the scrapbook, dated 1 week ago, reads, "Final landscaping details next." The most important part. The project was unfinished, just like Arthur's life. And you realize, with a sickening lurch, that Arthur's secret hobby might not just have been a hobby. It might have been a premonition. The discovery of the dollhouse replica shifts the entire atmosphere of the investigation. It's no longer just a search for a killer. It's a race to understand a victim who was documenting his own life, and perhaps his own demise in excruciating detail. The penciled rectangle in the dollhouse's yard is a ghostly blueprint of the crime scene. You're standing with Detective Rossi, the photo album open on the coffee table, the air thick with unanswered questions. Was Arthur planning a landscaping project that his killer gruesomely completed? Or was this something far stranger, a piece of a puzzle only he understood? Outside, the dig team finally confirms what everyone suspected. They uncover the body of Arthur Finch, wrapped carefully in thick black plastic sheeting and buried about 4 feet deep. The cause of death isn't immediately obvious. There are no overt signs of a struggle or major trauma, which only deepens the mystery. The medical examiner will have to find the answers on a stainless steel table, but the careful wrapping of the body is a significant clue. It speaks to a killer who was methodical, someone who wanted to contain the evidence, to minimize the mess. It wasn't an act of rage. It was a disposal. With the victim and the scene of the burial confirmed, the focus now pivots outward. Who knew about the yard? Who had access? Who had the skill to lay a patch of sod so perfectly it was nearly invisible? The answer comes not from a database or a phone record, but from the oldest form of police work, a neighborhood canvas. Detectives start knocking on doors along Willow Creek Lane. The responses are the predictable mix of shock, fear, and thinly veiled excitement. Most neighbors offer the same assessment of Arthur Finch: quiet, kept to himself, obsessed with his lawn. A few mention seeing him out with his dog, Winston, but no one really knew him. He was a fixture, a part of the neighborhood's scenery, but not a part of its social fabric. Then they get to the house directly across the street, number 115. The door is opened by a man in his late 40s, named Gary Miller. No relation to the officer. Gary is the polar opposite of Arthur Finch. He's broad-shouldered and sun-weathered, with a friendly, easygoing smile. He's wearing a polo shirt with a Miller's Majestic Lawns logo embroidered on his chest. He invites the detectives in without a hint of hesitation. Gary is a fountain of information. He expresses profound shock and sadness over Arthur's death. Art was a great guy, you know? Little odd, very particular, but harmless. He talks about how he and Arthur would sometimes chat over the fence about fertilizer and weed control. He portrays himself as the friendly, helpful neighbor. "Did you notice anything unusual at Arthur's house over the last week?" Rossi asks, her eyes taking in Gary's own neat, but not obsessively so, home. Gary furrows his brow, playing the part of a concerned citizen, trying his best to help. "You know," he says, snapping his fingers, "now that you mention it, I did do a little work for him, just last weekend." This is the moment. The first connection. Work? What kind of work? His sprinkler system went on the fritz, dug up a small patch in the middle of his yard to fix a busted pipe. I felt so bad about messing up his perfect lawn that I went and got a fresh piece of sod and laid it for him myself. Free of charge, of course. He was so grateful. The explanation is perfect. Almost too perfect. It accounts for the rectangle of new sod, the disturbed earth, everything. It's a ready-made alibi wrapped in a bow of neighborly generosity. The second you hear it, your internal alarm bells start ringing. It's the kind of neat, tidy story that criminals rehearse in the mirror.
This presents a classic investigative dilemma. Gary's story is plausible, and without more evidence, challenging it directly could make him lawyer up and shut down the interview. This is where the Reed technique, a controversial but widely used interrogation method, often comes into play. The first step isn't confrontation, but building rapport and observing behavior during non-accusatory questions. Rossi is doing just that, watching Gary's body language, his cadence, the way his eyes flick away for a moment when he mentions the busted pipe. "That was very generous of you, Gary," Rossi says, her tone conversational. "Do you happen to remember what day that was?" "Let's see," he says, tapping his chin. "It would have been Saturday morning. Yeah, Saturday. I was over there for a couple of hours." A Saturday morning, a time when other neighbors might have been out, able to see him working. It's a smart detail for an alibi, but it's also a testable one. The unusual detail in this encounter isn't something Gary says, it's something in his home. On a small table by the front door, next to a bowl of keys, sits a small, framed photo. It's of Gary and a woman, both smiling on a beach. The woman is attractive, with bright blonde hair and a familiar smile. Rossi recognizes her almost instantly from the Emmy's preliminary report photos of Arthur's personal effects. It's Arthur Finch's ex-wife. This is the second heart-stopping twist. The helpful neighbor, the man who just happened to fix a sprinkler pipe under the exact spot where a body was buried, is in a relationship with the victim's former spouse. The random act of kindness is suddenly drenched in a whole new context. The worlds of these two men, the quiet accountant and the friendly landscaper, were not just connected by a picket fence, they were deeply and perhaps dangerously entangled. Experts often debate the coincidence theory in criminal cases. Can a string of highly improbable coincidences on its own be enough to secure a conviction? Legally, it's shaky ground. A defense attorney would have a field day arguing that it's all just bad luck and circumstance. But for an investigator like Rossi, coincidence is a myth. It's a signpost pointing toward a hidden truth. Rossi doesn't let her expression change. She thanks Gary for his time and his help. "We'll be in touch if we have any more questions," she says, her voice even. As she and her partner walk back to their car, the friendly facade of Willow Creek Lane seems to crumble into dust. The case has just narrowed dramatically. The motive, which a few hours ago was a complete mystery, is starting to take shape. Love, jealousy, money. It almost always comes back to one of the three. And Gary Miller, the man with the perfect alibi and the picture on the table, has just become their primary and only suspect. You're back at the precinct. The stale coffee and hum of fluorescent lights a familiar backdrop to the mounting tension. The photo of Gary Miller with Arthur Finch's ex-wife, a woman named Sharon, has blown the case wide open. Detective Rossi now has a plausible motive, or at least the seeds of one. Jealousy, old resentments, financial ties from the divorce. The possibilities are a dark, tangled web. Gary's story about the sprinkler pipe, once a neat and tidy alibi, now looks like a piece of desperate misdirection. But it's still his word against the collection of strange circumstances. Rossi needs something physical, something that puts Gary in that yard for a reason other than fixing a pipe. The forensics report from the dig site comes back, and it's a mix of confirmations and new frustrations. The soil samples from under the new sod match the soil on the shovel found in Arthur's garage. No surprise there. Gary claimed he used Arthur's tools. The black plastic sheeting the body was wrapped in is a common construction-grade material, available at any hardware store. Untraceable. The ME's preliminary report confirms Arthur wasn't shot or stabbed. The cause of death is listed as asphyxiation, but with subtle signs of chemical poisoning. A toxicology screen is underway, but results could take days. It was a quiet, clean murder, the kind a careful person would commit. Rossi's team starts digging into Gary Miller's life. His landscaping business is legitimate, but barely breaking even. He has a couple of minor priors from his youth, a DUI, a bar fight, nothing that screams premeditated murderer. They bring in Sharon, the ex-wife, for questioning. She's cooperative, confirming she's been dating Gary for about 6 months. She claims her divorce with Arthur was amicable, a simple matter of growing apart. She says Arthur knew about her and Gary and was perfectly fine with it. Arthur lived in his own little world, she tells Rossi, a hint of old frustration in her voice. As long as his lawn was perfect and his numbers added up, he didn't care what anyone else did. Her story, like Gary's, is smooth, plausible, but it doesn't sit right. Rossi needs a crack, a fissure in their carefully constructed wall of normalcy. She sends a team back to Arthur's house, telling them to reprocess the entire scene. "I don't care if you have to rip up the floorboards," she says. "The answer is in that house." Remember that photo album, the one with the dollhouse replica of 114 Willow Creek Lane? Rossi goes back to it, studying the last photograph again, the one with the penciled-in rectangle. She looks at the notes in the margin, his neat, precise handwriting. Final landscaping details next, the most important part. It gnaws at you. Why was it the most important part? What was he planning for that spot? The answer comes from an unexpected place. The forensics team, sifting through the soil samples taken from the burial site for a second time, finds something they missed in the initial sweep. It's microscopic, easily mistaken for a fleck of sand or mineral, but under high magnification, it's unmistakable. It's gritter, tiny iridescent blue flecks of craft gritter, an impossibly unusual detail to find in a patch of freshly turned soil. This is the linchpin, the piece that doesn't fit. Where in the world did gritter come from? It's a detail so bizarre, it has to mean something. Rossi immediately thinks of the dollhouses. She races back to Arthur's office, to the closet where his secret hobby was stored. She carefully examines the Victorian mansion, the beach house, the log cabin. No gritter. They are realistic, meticulously detailed, but free of anything so whimsical. Then she remembers the work in progress, the replica of his own home. It wasn't in the closet with the others. Where was it? A frantic search of the house ensues. They finally find it in a spare room, covered by a dust sheet. On a workbench, surrounded by tiny tools and pots of paint, sits the half-finished dollhouse. Rossi lifts the dust sheet, and you see it immediately. The dollhouse replica of 114 Willow Creek Lane is more than just a model. It's a diorama of a specific moment in time. In the living room, a miniature Winston, the golden retriever, is frozen midpoint, his nose aimed at the back door. On the porch, a tiny half-full glass of lemonade sits on a table. He was documenting the scene as it was on the day he disappeared. Rossi's eyes go to the dollhouse's backyard. The penciled-in rectangle is still there, but next to the workbench, she finds what she's looking for: a small, open container of iridescent blue glitter, and a tiny, hand-painted sign that reads, "Future site of our stargazing patio." Beside it is a note that reads, "A surprise for Sharon, blue quartzite tiles to match her eyes." This is the first major twist. The burial spot wasn't a random patch of lawn. It was the intended site of a romantic gift from Arthur to his ex-wife. A gift he clearly believed would win her back. A gift Gary Miller would have seen as a threat. The theory that the divorce was amicable and that Arthur was fine with her new relationship vaporizes in an instant. Arthur was trying to rekindle their romance. The motive is no longer just jealousy, it's the fear of being replaced. This discovery brings up a fascinating legal debate about evidence and intent. Can a dollhouse be considered a document in the legal sense, like a diary or a letter? Experts still argue whether artistic representations can be used to prove a victim's state of mind or future intentions. A defense attorney could argue it's just a fantasy, a creative whim. But to Rossi, that dollhouse is a testament. It's Arthur's last will and testament, written not in words, but in balsa wood and glue. Now the glitter. Rossi has a hunch. She gets on the phone. Get a warrant for Gary Miller's workshop and his truck, and bring in his work boots from the night of the murder. I want them swept for glitter. The final, damning twist of the section comes a few hours later. The forensics report on Gary's work boots is back. Tucked deep into the tread of his left boot, they found it. A single, microscopic, iridescent blue fleck. The glitter connects Gary not just to the yard, but to the very soil that was used to bury Arthur Finch. The soil that Arthur had likely been preparing for his grand romantic gesture. Gary's alibi is shattered. The sprinkler pipe was a lie. He wasn't there on Saturday morning doing a favor. He was there under the cover of darkness, standing in a hole filled with glitter and romantic intentions, burying the man he saw as his rival. The cheeky warning from the beginning of the story echoes in your mind. The darkness lurking under the perfect lawn wasn't just a secret. It was a story of love, obsession, and betrayal, all betrayed by a single, shimmering fleck of blue. The single fleck of blue glitter on Gary Miller's boot is the drop of water that breaks the dam. It's circumstantial, yes, but it's a powerful, unexplainable link. A defense attorney can wave away coincidences, but it's hard to explain away your client's boot tread containing the exact same microscopic craft material that the victim was using for a secret project at the precise location where his body was found. The weight of it all is crushing. Detective Rossi brings Gary Miller in. This time, he doesn't walk into the precinct with the confident swagger of a helpful neighbor. He's escorted, his hands cuffed behind his back, his friendly smile replaced by a tight, gray mask of fear. He's placed in a small, windowless interrogation room. The air is cold, the silence heavy. You are a fly on the wall, watching the final act of this suburban tragedy. Rossi doesn't start with the glitter. She doesn't start with the body or the dollhouse. She starts with Sharon. She places the framed photo from Gary's entryway table in the center of the metal table between them. She's a beautiful woman, Gary. Rossi begins, her voice soft, almost sympathetic. It must have been hard, dating her, knowing Arthur was just across the street. Gary says nothing. He just stares at the photo. He was trying to win her back, wasn't he? Rossi continues, her voice still gentle.
We know about the stargazing patio, Gary. We know he was building it for her, a surprise. Blue tiles to match her eyes. You can see the flicker in Gary's expression, the surprise, the anger. He didn't know the why. He just knew Arthur was digging in that spot, messing with the perfect lawn. The first twist is realizing that Gary's crime may have been triggered by a complete misunderstanding. He saw the digging not as a romantic gesture, but as a deliberate provocation, a flaw in the perfection he coveted. That man was obsessed, he spits, his voice raspy. The dam is breaking. He tells him he went over to Arthur's house last Tuesday night to confront him. Not to kill him, he insists, but just to tell him to back off, to leave Sharon alone. This is a common tactic for suspects, admitting to a lesser confrontation to minimize their culpability. This is known in legal circles as presenting a mitigating circumstance, an attempt to reduce a charge from first-degree murder to manslaughter by claiming a lack of premeditation or acting under extreme emotional disturbance. He says he found Arthur in the spare bedroom, working on the dollhouse, the miniature replica of his own home. This is the detail that sent Gary over the edge. It was the strangest, most unsettling thing he had ever seen. He was in there with this tiny version of his house, Gary says, his voice a mix of disgust and disbelief. He showed it to me. He was proud of it. He pointed to the little dog, the little lemonade glass, and then he pointed to the little yard. And here comes the second, chilling twist. Arthur Finch, in his own strange way, confessed his plan to Gary. He explained the stargazing patio. He told Gary that he and Sharon had a special connection, that she would come back to him. He showed Gary the blue glitter, telling him it was the key, that it would sparkle under the moonlight, just like her eyes. In Arthur's mind, he was explaining his masterpiece. But to Gary, a man already simmering with insecurity and jealousy, it was a declaration of war. He was mocking me, he insists, though you, listening to the tale, know that it was far more likely Arthur's complete inability to read social cues. He said my love was cheap, but his was quartzite, permanent. He picked up one of those little dollhouse chairs and threw it at me. Can you believe that? A tiny little chair? The final confrontation didn't happen in the yard. It happened right there in the room with the dollhouse. According to Gary, they argued. It escalated. He claims Arthur took a swing at him. Gary, bigger and stronger, pushed him back. Arthur stumbled, falling backward against the workbench. A container of cleaning solvent, used for stripping paint from the miniatures, spilled across the table. The official cause of death, pending the full talk screen, was asphyxiation with signs of chemical poisoning. Gary doesn't admit to forcing him to ingest it, but describes a chaotic struggle where Arthur fell, hit his head, and somehow the solvent was ingested. It's a version of events that minimizes his own actions, painting it as a tragic accident.
Experts constantly debate the reliability of confessions obtained under pressure. A coerced confession can be a powerful but dangerously misleading piece of evidence. Rossi knows that Gary is shaping the narrative to his advantage. But the core elements are there: the confrontation, the motive, the location. The final, awful confession comes out. After the struggle, Arthur was dead or dying. Gary panicked. He knew he had to hide the body, and Arthur himself had provided the perfect place, the hole he had already dug in the backyard for his stargazing patio. Gary wrapped him in the plastic sheeting he had in his truck, carried him outside in the dead of night, and buried him. Then, using the skills of his trade, he went and got a fresh patch of sod and covered the wound in the earth so perfectly that no one would ever know. He cleaned the house, wiping down every surface, putting everything back in its place, creating the sterile, perfect crime scene that had so unnerved the first responding officers. He had, in essence, finished Arthur's last project. But he made one mistake. In the chaos of the spare bedroom, amidst the spilled glitter and cleaning solvents, a single fleck had clung to the tread of his boot, a tiny sparkling blue star that would become his undoing. The dollhouse, Arthur's strange and secret obsession, had in the end become his silent accuser. It wasn't just a replica of his house, it was a map of the crime,
a testament to the motive, and a confession waiting to be found. It showed not just what happened, but precisely why. Gary Miller sits in the stark white room, the story of Arthur's last moments hanging in the air like poison gas. His confession is a tangled mess of self-pity and justification, painting himself as the victim of a weird little man's provocations. But Detective Rossi isn't interested in his version of the emotional truth. She's interested in the physical truth. And there's one witness whose testimony hasn't been heard yet. "What about the dog, Gary?" Rossi asks, her voice cutting through his narrative. "Winston, you said you cleaned everything, put everything back. You didn't forget about the dog, did you?" Gary flinches. It's the first time he has looked genuinely unnerved. He saw the dog as part of the furniture, a silent furry obstacle. He never considered him a witness. The dog, he didn't do anything. He knows me. He just sat there. "He didn't just sit there, Gary," Rossi presses. "When my officers arrived, he was frozen, pointing right at the spot where you buried his master. Why would he do that? Dogs bark at intruders. They get scared and hide. They don't point unless you gave him a reason." You can see the memory dawning in Gary's eyes, the moment he finally understands his most critical mistake. The story tumbles out, no longer calculated, but panicked. After the struggle in the spare bedroom, after Arthur was silent on the floor, Winston had been standing in the hallway, just watching. His tail wasn't wagging, but he wasn't growling either. He was just watching the man who sometimes gave him treats, the man who was his master's neighbor. Gary knew he had to move the body, and he knew a barking dog would wake the entire neighborhood. So he did something he thought was clever. He walked over to Winston, knelt down, and petted him, whispering, "Good boy, Winston. It's okay, boy." He was exploiting the dog's trust. Then, as he dragged Arthur's body, wrapped in the black plastic, toward the sliding glass door, Winston got in his way, whining softly, confused by the smell of chemicals and the terrifying stillness of his owner. He needed the dog out of the path, and in a moment of twisted inspiration, he used the one thing he knew would work. He'd heard Arthur do it 1,000 times. He pointed to the back door and said, in a low and firm voice, "Out back, Winston. Go on, out back." This is the final, chilling detail. The command was a trigger for the dog's routine. Arthur would say "out back" and they would go into the yard to play. The dog's brain, flooded with the instinct to obey a familiar command, turned its attention to the yard. But his senses were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. He saw the man who gave the command, or a man giving the command, but he also saw his master, silent and broken, being dragged to a hole in the ground. The cognitive dissonance was too much. The dog's mind shattered. He couldn't bark, the man was familiar. He couldn't play, his master was gone. So he did the only thing his overloaded circuitry could manage. He froze. He pointed. He held the last command he was given, his entire being focused on the spot where he last saw his world disappear. The pointing wasn't an accusation. It was a scar, a psychic trauma made manifest. In the end, Gary's fate is sealed not by a dramatic courtroom showdown, but by the quiet, soul-crushing weight of the evidence. Faced with the glitter, his partial confession, and the undeniable motive, his lawyer advises him to take a deal. He agrees to an Alford plea, a peculiar and fascinating quirk of the American justice system. With an Alford plea, a defendant does not admit guilt, but concedes that the prosecution has sufficient evidence to likely secure a conviction. Gary Miller pleads guilty to second-degree murder, all while maintaining his official innocence, still clinging to his story that it was all just a tragic accident. He gets a reduced sentence, and the state avoids a costly trial. The use of an animal's behavior as evidence remains a hotly debated topic in legal theory. While Winston's pointing was the key that unlocked the entire case, could it have been formally used in court? Experts argue that while a trained canine's alert is established science, a pet's unique behavior is too subjective. A prosecutor couldn't tell a jury, "The dog pointed at the killer." But they can tell a story, a narrative where a loyal dog's strange grief led police to a hidden grave. Winston could never take the stand, but his silent testimony was louder than any human voice. He couldn't point out the man who did it, but he never stopped pointing at the crime itself. The final twist is the quietest one. Justice was served, but the system that delivered it has no category for its most important witness. Winston, the golden retriever, is released from evidence, from the strange limbo of being part of a crime scene, and goes to live with Arthur's sister, Carol. The house on Willow Creek Lane is sold. The perfect lawn is eventually dug up by a new family that wants a swimming pool. But the story remains, a testament to the fact that sometimes the deepest truths aren't found in fingerprints or DNA, but in the heartbreaking silent point of a dog who refused to look away. The echoes of the case on Willow Creek Lane fade, much like the flashing lights that once broke the suburban silence. The sharp edges of the crime, the glitter, the dollhouse, the pointing dog, soften into memory. Gary Miller is a name in a corrections department database, and Arthur Finch is a name on a headstone, his strange and secret world of miniature houses now packed away in evidence boxes. What remains is the quiet aftermath, the invisible ripples that spread outward from a single violent act. For Winston, it's the slow process of learning to trust again in a world that no longer contains his person. For the neighbors, it's the lingering suspicion that settles like a permanent frost over the once perfect street. A reminder that you never truly know what happens behind closed doors. And for us, it's another story concluded, another journey into the shadows that we can now step away from, back into the safety of our own quiet rooms. Thank you for joining me tonight, for lending me your time and your imagination. These stories are dark, but I believe there's a value in exploring them together, in understanding the complexities of human nature. If you found yourself captivated by tonight's tale, a like is always deeply appreciated, and leaving a comment helps more than you know. Sharing the video with someone you think might also enjoy these late-night journeys allows our community to grow. I'll be back soon with another case, another puzzle waiting to be pieced together under the dim lights. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other.